Hey everyone. Please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show. So I haven't done a read-through of the Guide to the World of Greyhawk in a while, so that's what we're going to do today on Greyhawk Ragnarok. So we left off at the Theocracy of the Pale. The Pale Theocracy of, it's listed here. The Theocracy of the Pale is one of those states that actually goes back to the very earliest time in Gary's campaign, because one of the religions that he had invented was Fultus of the Blinding Light, which in turn had its origin, I think, in the Prairie Home Companion. There was something about the Church of the Blinding Light, and they had like a hymn, "Oh blinding light, how something thou art," or something like that. And that kind of translated into this. It is noted as a particularly religiously intolerant land. They worship Fultus, who's the god of order. Um, and who is actually lawful neutral with good tendencies, or lawful good with neutral tendencies. So you can either be lawful neutral or lawful good, and the land itself tends to be much more lawful neutral. Um, it used to be part of Nyrond. When Nyrond became a separate nation, the highly religious people inhabiting the area claimed their autonomy. The clerical leaders were, in fact, the ruling nobles. Okay. Barbarian, humanoid, and bandit raiders plagued the Theocracy, and you can see it here on the map, right there. That's the Theocracy of the Pale. And you can see there's all these mountains right here where humanoids and such live, and right here is the Bone March, and it's a very quick uh, 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 route to get to them. There's also right here the Bandit Kingdoms, and they can just cut right across and raid into there. So it's very vulnerable in those terms, and that's what they're talking about. It has a population of about 250,000, which for the World of Greyhawk is pretty big. The World of Greyhawk generally has pretty low population densities throughout the book, so that's just something to bear in mind. One of it is mentioned in one of the Gord the Rogue books, where Gord has like um, had an affair with the daughter of one of the high level clerics, and he's on the run. So it's one of those places where you can have a lot of fun if you want to poke fun at intolerant religious societies. In the Greyhawk Wars, to moving forward, it fares pretty well. There's a little there's a big battle, but it's just like an isolated battle between them and Nyrond to the south. Um, they fare much better because of their relatively isolated position, because they've got the troll fens to the north, they've got the mountains to the east, they've got forests to the west. So they fare pretty well when it comes to all the rampaging armies, much better than the neighbors to the north, who get utterly obliterated. Uh, so there's that. Next one up is Perrenland, and Perrenland is a very interesting example, because Gygax's family was Swiss. References to medieval and Renaissance Switzerland keep coming up, and this is a perfect example of one. Perrenland is the concatenated cantons of Perrenland, and they are particularly noted for their mercenary pikemen, which is, if you're familiar with medieval history, that's we Swiss mercenaries were all over the place, and they basically perfected the art of fighting with the pikes and squares. Um, and the use of the word cantons, obviously in Switzerland they have cantons, where in the United States they have states. So it's very much a Switzerland analog. And if you can also see, it's off to the side here, uh, off to the west there, on my curtain map. Um, but it's a relatively isolated. It's got mountains on three sides. It's got a big lake on one side. So it's able to weather things pretty well. It does feature in a minor way in the Lost Caverns of Sajkonth. as one of the powers vying for the secrets of the caverns. Um, but you don't really see a lot of it in a lot of places. It's a very mercantile place. Um, let's see here. Ba-da-ba-da, clan holds were marked into cantonments, and the leaders, hetmen, vormans, or whatever, elected an executive head, likened to a king, with limited powers to rule for an 8-year period, with counsel from the assembled clan leaders. So this is another example too, which we saw in the yeomanry, where yeomanry, yeah, where it's an example of democracy in what is normally a pseudo feudal uh, continent. We have these little pockets of democracy. This is one of them through the election of the hitman. Um, the chief export is her well-trained mercenary bands. Such a force is typically made up of pikemen and pole-armed mountaineers, lowland crossbowmen, and other infantry armed with battle axe, flail, etc. Rounding out the infantry contingent, the remaining 10% is cavalry, and it goes on. Although Perrenland does not claim the valley of the Quagflow River below the Klatspur Range, that's interesting because the Quagflow River isn't named on the map. It's just been named here, which is an interesting little bit of trivia. Um, uh, the high elves from that region will often be seen in service with a band of Perrenlanders serving as scouts and light infantry. They send mercenaries into Valuna, Furiondi, and Bissell, and Ket has used them. Um, Perrenland is always careful to maintain strict watch on all frontiers. Bodies of superb militia can be raised in but a single day to support the permanent garrisons. And a squadron of warships makes the lake its own private domain. And Perrenland is another land that pretty much weathered the Greyhawk Wars later on without incident. Because again of its isolated position, it's on fair to Midland terms with Ayus, so he doesn't see it's not necessary to conquer him. It is interesting to note that Perrenland was under the control of Ayus's mother for a decade, Igwil, the Witch Queen, who that's again coming from the Lost Caverns of Sajkonth. Um, that whole thing all ties together. I actually did a video on the rise of Igwilv and Ayuz. You can check that out. I'll see if I can finagle it to pop up here. I've never been able to get that to work. Uh, but it doesn't feature largely in the Flyness, but when it does, it is very and it's unmistakable because it's pretty unique. And again, the reference there to the strong borders and stuff, that's another reference to modern day Switzerland, which is very very much of a neutral, isolationist, very strong kind of hedgehoggy thing. It was estimated that during the Cold War that the Russians would just ignore it, like the Germans did in World War II, because everybody's got a gun and everybody's really trained, and there's this enormous civil defense system in Switzerland. So it's kind of the same idea. Um, Next, we come to the plains of the Paynims, the tribes of the plains of the Paynims. Um, uh, it's a backloonish land, so it's way off to the side here of the map that I have behind me. These nomads evidently move out of the dry steppe region when summer makes the area an arid waste and return there in the rainy season. Ul has a permanent territory. Uh, Now, this is one of those times when Gygax goes into great detail about the noble titles used by the nomads. And here it actually matters because he's using a mix of um, Mongol and Persian titles. And the Persian titles are used in one particular area of the Paynims, so one group of tribes, and um, the Mongol ones are also used, but in another area. But it's very interesting, as the tiger and wolf nomads also use the title of Khan, etc. It is speculated that these peoples are branches of the same race, separated by an influx of later nomads who use the titles of Amir and so forth. And what that's basically saying is the all the nomads, so like the nomads that are even out, as far as here. all the way back to the west. Those are all one big people, and then there was another group of nomads that kind of bisected them, and those were the ones that finally settled down into areas like Ket, and the civilized lands, Ekbir, and so forth. So you've got some history kind of snuck in there through the clever use of the titles and so forth. So it's really cool to see. I actually did an article on my blog, which is available as a free download, link below, which shows the migrations of the different nomad tribes in the Paynims, which I'm very proud of. And it's got a map and everything. So feel free to check that out if you're at all interested. Ul is treated in its own right later on, so we'll let that go. And then we'll wrap it up today with the Pomarj. A lot of you will know that I actually had an article published in Dragon Magazine called "See the Pomarj and Die," and basically, it was my attempt to kind of beef up the history, and I located all the tribes on which hex this tribe was there, and this had so many warriors, and it was in this hex. It was a whole big thing. They did a whole hold up cover color workup of it. It was really nice. So yeah, do check that out in Dragon Magazine. I think it was 164 or 167. I need to double check. It's been a while. So but it's very it's a humanoid ruled land, and it used to be under the Prince of Ulick. So it's down here. It's this thing here, and this does feature prominently in a lot of things. It used to be under the Prince of Ulick, who was a dwarf. Then the human nobles of the land kind of rose up and threw out the dwarves, and the dwarves just said, "Okay, you don't want us, we don't have to be here." And then a few years later, all the humanoids that were driven out of the Lort Mill Mountains here, they all came right down and took over in the Pomarj, and they gutted all the humans, took over or destroyed all the castles, and now it's a humanoid realm. This is where we see the Slave Lords series of modules take place. This is where the Siege of Castle Strandkeep happens, which is in the Gord the Rogue book. Art, not Artifact of Evil. Wait, yes, Artifact of Evil, and it's a later on Parash Mak, who is later retconned into being one of the slave lords, but he's a very superior half orc, and he basically binds all of the all of the humanoid tribes together, and they conquer the southern half of the Wild Coast here. So it's the empire where none has stood. So it's very much of um, a, an important area. It is not too far away from the city of Greyhawk and the center of the Flness, so it has that going for it. There are legends that there are sleeping things. My own in the hills. My own contribution to that was Crovis, the Flan quasi deity. Other people, I think in the original campaign, it was supposed to be a pit fiend who was actually in there, and other people have done other things in there too. So it's one of those places that is really great for adventuring into because it is so lawless, and you get this impression of these little pockets of humanity that are oppressed by the humanoids, and they're enslaved and stuff. The orcs and hobgoblins and everybody are dominating everything. So you can really see the possibilities for PCs to go in heroically and thin out the humanoids and help the besieged human populations and so forth. But then again, you also have evil humans that are in there taking advantage of the situation. The place is rich with silver and gold mine, silver, electrum, gold, and gems. So it can be a very wealthy place, but because it's the humanoids and um, you know they don't really do that kind of work for themselves. It's kind of left to go. So you have all these abandoned mines from when the dwarves ruled the place. It's really well constructed to be part of a D&D campaign. So yeah. So anyway, there we go. I'm gonna cap it off there. Hope you're enjoying this series, and hope you're having a wonderful day. And I will talk to y'all later.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.